The leather chair squeaked every time the lawyer shifted his weight, a rhythmic complaint that had been grating on my nerves for the past 40 minutes. Each squeak punctuated another item crossed off the list of our shared life. The couch, the coffee maker, the framed print we'd bought in Barcelona. The sound mixed with the hum of the air conditioning and the distant wail of sirens outside, creating a symphony of dissolution. I focused on the grain of the mahogany table, traced the whorls with my eyes, while Marcus's lawyer droned on about asset division. My soon-to-be ex-husband sat across from me, fingers drumming against his phone case, black, sleek, decorated with a faded Captain America sticker he'd never had the heart to peel off. Even now, even here. In the sterile conference room that smelled of lemon furniture polish and the ghost of someone's turkey sandwich, he couldn't let go of his fandoms. And then there's the matter of the Comic-Con tickets, Marcus's lawyer said, and I almost laughed. Almost. My own lawyer, Patricia, a woman whose perfume always reminded me of my grandmother's garden, roses and something sharper, maybe lavender, shifted beside me. I felt her tension before I saw it, the way she straightened in her chair, preparing to fight over something she probably thought was worthless. The San Diego Comic-Con tickets, the other lawyer clarified, pushing a paper across the table. 4-day passes, already purchased for July. Mr. Chen would like to retain these as they were purchased with his separate funds prior to the marriage. The paper slid to a stop in front of me. I could see Marcus's credit card statement stapled to it, the charge from 6 months ago, $2,400 for tickets to a convention where grown adults dressed up as fictional characters and waited in lines for hours to get a glimpse of actors who played those characters. In another life, I would have nodded. In another life, I would have said, fine, whatever. With that particular blend of dismissiveness and exhaustion that had characterized the last 2 years of our marriage. In another life, I would have been thinking about the apartment we were fighting over, the savings account, the vintage record player that had belonged to his father. But the squeak of the chair stopped. Everything stopped. The room tilted, just slightly like a photograph held at an angle. The fluorescent lights above buzzed louder. Or maybe I just noticed them for the first time. My fingers resting on the edge of the table looked wrong somehow. The nail polish too bright, too pink, too recent. I'd painted them last Tuesday. I remembered last Tuesday. I remembered waking up and choosing this color, Sunset Boulevard, because it was cheerful, and I'd needed something cheerful because I'd been dreading this meeting. But I also remembered waking up on a Tuesday, decades from now, in a hospital bed that smelled like antiseptic and death, with lungs that wouldn't fill no matter how hard I tried. Miss Rivera, Patricia's voice came from very far away. I remembered dying alone. I remembered the nurse with kind eyes and cold hands who'd held mine at the end because there was no one else. I remembered the regret, thick and choking, worse than the fluid in my lungs. I remembered thinking, in those final moments, about all the small choices that had led me to that moment, alone, broke, forgotten, and I remembered Marcus. Not the Marcus sitting across from me now, 32 years old with his hair still thick and dark, with his shoulders still straight, and his eyes still capable of meeting mine. I remembered the Marcus I'd seen in a photograph in a magazine in a hospital waiting room 23 years from now, standing on a red carpet at a movie premiere. I remembered the caption, "Tech mogul Marcus Chen and wife Diane at the premiere of Nexus," based on the graphic novel series. I'd stared at that photograph for a long time, there in the waiting room during one of my many visits for pneumonia, for the chronic condition that would eventually kill me. For the lungs that had never been the same after the mold in the cheap apartment I'd moved to after the divorce. I'd stared at Marcus's smile, at the woman beside him, at the obvious wealth evident in every detail of the photograph. And I'd wondered, with the bitter clarity of someone who had nothing left to lose, where it had all gone wrong. The Comic-Con tickets. "Miss Rivera?" Patricia said again, and this time she touched my arm. Her fingers were warm through the silk of my blouse, the blouse I'd bought on sale, the blouse I'd been so proud of, the blouse I'd be wearing to job interviews in 2 months after I quit my marketing job in a fit of righteous anger that felt good for exactly 3 days before the panic set in. I knew what happened if I signed this paper. Marcus would go to Comic-Con. He'd go to some panel for a new graphic novel series called Nexus. He'd meet the creator, a woman named Sarah Chen. No relation, they'd joke about it in interviews later. and they'd start talking about the intersection of technology and storytelling. Marcus worked in software development, something boring with data analysis that he'd always been embarrassed about, like it wasn't creative enough. But Sarah would see something in his ideas. They'd collaborate on an app. The app would become a platform. The platform would become a company. And I would be in a one-bedroom apartment in a building with a broken elevator and mold behind the bathroom tiles, wondering why my lungs always hurt, why I was always tired, why I'd thrown away a marriage over pride and stubbornness, and the belief that I deserved better than someone who spent money on comic book conventions. "I want the tickets," I said. The room did that tilting thing again, but in reverse this time, like reality was resettling itself around my words. "I'm sorry," Marcus's lawyer blinked at me. "The Comic-Con tickets?" "Yes." My voice sounded strange in my own ears. Stronger. Clearer. "I want the tickets. In the settlement. I'll give him the record player. And the stand mixer, but I want the Comic-Con tickets." Patricia leaned in close, her rose lavender perfume overwhelming. "Elena, those tickets are worth maybe $1,200 each. The record player is valued at—" "I don't care," I said, and I didn't. What was a vintage record player worth compared to not dying alone? I want them." Marcus was staring at me. I could feel his eyes, confused and a little hurt. In all the months of our separation, through all the arguments about who got what and who was to blame and whose fault it was that we'd grown apart, I'd never once expressed interest in his hobbies. I'd made that very clear. I'd called them childish. I'd said he needed to grow up. I'd said a lot of things I couldn't take back. Things that had built a wall between us brick by brick until we couldn't see each other anymore. "You hate Comic-Con," Marcus said quietly. "You've always hated it." He wasn't wrong. In my first life, and God, what a strange thought that was, my first life, I had hated it. I'd hated the crowds, the noise, the costumes, the way grown adults wept over fictional characters. I'd hated how much money Marcus spent on it, how much time he devoted to it, how his face lit up when he talked about some new series or some artist he admired. I'd seen it as competition, as proof that I wasn't enough for him, that he needed these fantasy worlds because our real world together wasn't sufficient. I'd been so stupid. "I know," I said, meeting his eyes for the first time in weeks. They were brown, darker than mine, with those little flecks of gold that caught the light. I'd forgotten about those flecks. Or maybe I just stopped looking closely enough to see them. "But I want them anyway." His lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Chen purchased 4 tickets. He intended to take his brother and 2 friends. If Miss Rivera takes the tickets, she can have them," Marcus said, still looking at me. "If that's what she wants." "Marcus," his lawyer started. "Oh, she can have them," he repeated, and something in his voice made me think of the way he used to sound when we first met, when he'd told me about his dreams of creating something meaningful, something that mattered, before I'd learned to tune it out. Before I'd started rolling my eyes every time he got excited about some new project. Patricia was looking at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Maybe dying and waking up decades in the past qualified as losing your mind, but I felt clearer than I had in years. Both years, all the years, the ones I'd lived and the ones I hadn't lived yet. "Then it's settled," Marcus's lawyer said, making a note on his legal pad with short, sharp strokes that sounded like tiny judgments. "Miss Rivera receives the 4 Comic-Con tickets, valued at approximately $4,800. Mr. Yu Chen receives the record player, valued at $3,000, and the KitchenAid stand mixer, valued at $450. The numbers didn't add up in my favor. Patricia would tell me that later, in the parking garage, her voice tight with professional frustration. She'd tell me I'd just made an emotional decision that cost me real assets. She'd tell me that tickets to a convention were a consumable good, that I couldn't even resell them for full value this close to the event. She'd be right about all of that. She'd also be completely wrong. The meeting ended an hour later with handshakes and signatures and the peculiar sensation of having dismantled a life in bullet points. Marcus left first, his footsteps echoing in the hallway outside, and I sat for a moment longer, staring at my copy of the settlement agreement. The paper was warm from the printer, slightly curled at the edges. "Elena," Patricia said, packing her briefcase with efficient movements that spoke of a dozen more meetings just like this one. "I need you to understand that this was not a good trade. Emotionally, I get it. You want to prove something to him or to yourself, or it's not about that, I said, which was true and also not true. Everything was about everything else. Every choice rippled outward in ways you couldn't predict until you'd lived them once already. She sighed, snapping her briefcase closed. The sound was final, conclusive. Well, it's done now. Try to have fun at the convention at least. Maybe you'll meet someone in a Spider-Man costume. She meant it as a joke. I smiled because that's what you did when your lawyer made a joke. Even when you were thinking about hospital beds and mold and the weight of decades you hadn't lived yet pressing down on your chest. I left the building and stepped out into June sunshine that felt too bright, too warm, too alive. The city smelled like hot asphalt and someone's cigarette smoke and frying food from a cart on the corner. I stood there for a moment, letting the heat sink into my skin, feeling the realness of it. I was 32 years old. My lungs worked. My body didn't ache. I had time. I had so much time. My phone buzzed in my purse, a text from my mother asking how it went, if I was okay, if I needed anything. I'd call her later. Right now, I needed to walk, to move, to feel the pavement under my feet, and know that I was here, that this was real, that I'd been given something impossible and terrifying and precious. The Comic-Con tickets were being mailed to my new apartment. Our apartment. The one that Marcus and I had shared, that I would be moving out of next week. Studio apartment, 4th floor, broken elevator, cheap rent. In my first life, I'd lived there for 8 years before the mold got bad enough that I had to move, and by then my lungs were already compromised, my health already spiraling. I stood on the corner, waiting for the walk signal, and pulled out my phone. The browser still had the tab open from this morning. Apartment listings. I'd been looking at studios, at cheap one-bedrooms in bad neighborhoods, at anything I could afford on my salary, proving to myself that I could make it alone, that I didn't need Marcus's money or his support or anything from him at all. Pride. It had been pride all along, hadn't it? Pride and fear and the desperate need to prove I was strong enough to not need anyone. I closed the tab. The walk signal changed. The little white figure appeared, beckoning me forward. I crossed the street and kept walking, past my car in the parking garage, past the coffee shop where Marcus and I used to meet for breakfast on Saturdays, past all the familiar landmarks of a life I was leaving behind. My phone buzzed again. Not my mother this time. Marcus. I don't understand, the text said, but I hope you enjoy it. You have the confirmation number, right? Reg 452789. Guest list is supposed to be really good this year. I stopped walking. The sidewalk was crowded with lunchtime traffic, people in business casual streaming around me like water around a stone. Someone bumped my shoulder, apologized without looking, kept moving. The sun was warm on the back of my neck. Guest list. He'd mentioned the guest list. In my other life, God, I needed a better term for it, my previous life, my first timeline, something that didn't make me sound completely insane. I'd never looked at the guest list. I'd never even opened the confirmation email. I'd let Marcus have the tickets without a second thought, without curiosity, without any interest in what I was giving up. I pulled up the email on my phone, scrolling back to March, to the confirmation from Comic-Con International. There it was, confirmation number, ticket details, hotel recommendations, and at the bottom, a link. View preliminary guest list. My thumb hovered over the link. Around me, the city continued its ordinary chaos. A bus hissed to a stop at the corner. Someone's music leaked from their headphones. A bass line I almost recognized. A dog barked. The sun beat down. Everything was so normal, so mundane, so beautifully, terribly ordinary. I tapped the link. The list loaded slowly, my phone's connection struggling. Lines of text appeared in fragments. Names, titles, affiliations. I scrolled past the usual suspects. Actors from superhero movies, voice actors from animated series, YouTube personalities with millions of followers. And then, there, in the middle of the page under special guests and industry professionals, Sarah Chen, creator of Nexus graphic novel series Robert Jang, senior editor, Titan Comics, Melissa Torres, literary agent, specializing in graphic novel adaptations, David Park, producer, Park Media Studios. My heart did something complicated in my chest. But it was the next section that made my hands start shaking. Tech and Innovation Panel, Dr. James Morrison, AI researcher, Morrison Labs' Catherine Webb, founder and CEO, Web Technologies. And special guest, Elon Musk will be conducting a fireside chat on Saturday evening about the intersection of technology and storytelling. Elon Musk in 2024. Before so many things. I kept scrolling. Sunday keynote speaker, George R.R. Martin exclusive portfolio reviews with Jim Lee, Fiona Staples, Scotty Young. And then, almost hidden in the list of professional networking events, Friday Night Industry Mixer, badge holders with professional credentials invited, connect with agents, publishers, and production companies, Cash Bar. I stood there on the sidewalk, phone clutched in my hand, reading and rereading the list. This wasn't just a convention. This was a networking event disguised as a fan celebration. This was where the people who made entertainment, who controlled the flow of money and opportunity and creative vision, all congregated in one place for 4 days. This was where Marcus had met Sarah Chen, but it was also where he could have met 100 other people, made 100 other connections, where anyone with the right ticket and the right approach could find themselves in a conversation that changed their life. The record player Marcus had wanted, the one his father had left him, would eventually be sold by his brother for $800 at an estate sale. I knew because I'd seen it listed online while scrolling through vintage electronics late at night in my hospital room, unable to sleep because my lungs wouldn't let me lie flat. I'd recognized it from the maker's mark, from the specific model. I'd clicked through the photos and felt nothing but a distant, aching regret. The Comic-Con tickets Marcus had wanted to keep were worth $2,400. The guest list was worth everything. I didn't go back to work that afternoon. I called in sick, which wasn't entirely a lie. I felt feverish, unmoored, like I was coming down with something that didn't have a name. My boss, Jennifer, made sympathetic noises and told me to rest. She'd fire me in 3 months when I quit without notice after a fight about a client presentation. I knew this with the same certainty I knew my own name. Instead of going to the office, I went to the public library. The main branch downtown was a beautiful building, all marble and tall windows, with that specific smell libraries have, old paper and furniture polish, and the accumulated breath of thousands of readers. I'd loved it once before I got too busy, too tired, too caught up in the daily grind of a life that was slowly, imperceptibly narrowing. I found a desk in a quiet corner and opened my laptop. Then I started researching. Sarah Chen. Nexus, Marcus Chen. I built timelines, cross-referenced articles, traced the path of their success like a detective reconstructing a crime. It was all there in the digital footprints of my first life, preserved in cached pages and archived interviews. Sarah had launched Nexus as a webcomic in 2020, self-published, barely noticed. By 2024, she had built enough of a following to get a booth at Comic-Con, to be invited as a guest. But she was still small-time, still looking for her big break. In an interview from 2027, she mentioned meeting Marcus at Comic-Con 2024, how they'd bonded over their shared frustration with how technology could tell stories better, could immerse readers in new ways. Marcus had this vision, she'd said in the interview, which I found in a tech magazine from 2028. He saw how we could use AR integration, how readers could point their phones at panels and see the art come to life. It sounds simple now, but back then nobody was doing it for comics. We built the prototype in about 6 months, funded it ourselves with credit cards and hope. The app had launched in 2025. By 2026, they had 5 million downloads. By 2027, they'd sold the company to a major publisher for $47 million. Marcus and Sarah had walked away with enough money to fund their next venture, a production studio focused on adapting graphic novels for streaming services. I'd read about it in that magazine in the hospital waiting room and felt nothing but a dull, distant hatred for my younger self, the self who'd been too proud to support her husband's dreams, who'd seen his passion as a character flaw instead of the seed of something extraordinary. But that wasn't the whole story, was it? I kept digging, opening new tabs, following threads. There were other people who'd been at that Comic-Con. Other creators, other developers, other dreamers with big ideas and empty pockets. Most of them had gone nowhere. Most of them had returned to their day jobs and let their dreams gather dust. The difference wasn't just being there. The difference was having the right combination of timing, talent, capital, and luck. The difference was being ready when opportunity arrived. I pulled up my bank account on my phone. After the divorce was finalized, after everything was split, I'd have about $34,000. Marcus would have roughly the same, plus the record player and the mixer. We'd both kept our retirement accounts separate. We'd both kept our debts separate. We'd done everything right, legally speaking, to make the dissolution as clean and fair as possible. $34,000 wouldn't go far in San Diego during Comic-Con. Hotel rooms were already booked or priced at $400 a night. I'd need professional clothes if I wanted to attend the industry events. I'd need business cards, a portfolio, if I wanted to pitch myself as what? What could I possibly offer these people? I sat back in the library chair, staring at the fluorescent lights above me. An older woman at the next desk was reading a romance novel, her face soft with contentment. A teenager across the aisle had headphones on, bobbing his head to music I couldn't hear while he typed on a laptop covered in stickers. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware that someone sitting nearby had died and come back, had been given an impossible gift, and was currently trying to figure out how not to waste it. What did I have to offer? I was 32 years old. I had a bachelor's degree in marketing and 5 years of experience at a mid-sized firm where I wrote copy for dental practices and local restaurants. I had no connections in entertainment, no portfolio of creative work, no technical skills that would impress anyone at a tech panel. But I had something nobody else in that convention hall would have. I knew what was coming. I opened a new document and started writing. Every major tech development I could remember from the next 10 years, every entertainment trend, every social media platform that would rise and fall, every major world event. I wrote until my fingers cramped, until the words started blurring together, until the librarian announced they were closing in 15 minutes. Then I saved the document, encrypted it, backed it up to 3 different cloud services, and closed my laptop. Knowledge was power, they said, but knowledge without action was just trivia. I needed a plan. The apartment felt different when I got home. Emptier, even though we'd barely started packing. Marcus had already moved most of his clothes to his brother's place. The bookshelf held gaps where his graphic novels used to be, creating a pattern of absence like missing teeth. His toothbrush was gone from the bathroom. The coffee maker, technically mine now according to the settlement, sat on the counter looking abandoned. I made tea instead of coffee, something I never did, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. The document I'd started at the library stared back at me, pages of information that would sound like ravings if I tried to explain it to anyone. 2024, major social media platform will announce pivot to video content. 2025, new AI art generation tool will go viral, causing massive controversy. 2025, housing market will soften in major cities. 2026, major tech company will release VR headset that finally achieves mainstream adoption. On and on, bullet points of a future I'd already lived. But seeing it written down like this, I realized the problem. Even if I could convince someone I knew these things, even if I could somehow prove I wasn't just making educated guesses, what then? I couldn't exactly walk up to investors and say, "Hi, I'm from the future, want to fund my startup." I needed to think smaller, more immediate, more achievable. The Comic-Con tickets would arrive in 3 days, according to the tracking number Marcus had sent me. The convention was in exactly 4 weeks. I had 4 weeks to prepare, to figure out what I was going to do when I got there, how I was going to turn this second chance into something real. My phone rang. My mother. I'd forgotten to call her back. "Mija," she said when I answered, her voice warm and worried in equal measure. "How did it go?" "It's done," I said, which was true. "It's all finalized. And how do you feel?" How did I feel? I felt like I'd lived 67 years in one day. I felt like I'd died and been reborn. I felt terrified and exhilarated, and completely, utterly lost. "Relieved," I said instead. I think this was the right thing." "You sound strange," my mother said, her maternal radar pinging on some frequency only she could hear. "Are you eating? You need to eat. Come over for dinner tomorrow. I'll make your favorite." "Mom, I'm fine. Tomorrow," she said firmly, 6 o'clock. "And Elena, whatever you're planning, whatever wild idea you have in your head right now, because I know you, Mija, I know that tone in your voice, just remember that you don't have to do anything right this minute. You can take time, you can breathe. I promised I'd come to dinner. I promised I'd breathe. I didn't promise I wouldn't do anything wild, because my mother knew me too well and would hear the lie." After I hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment and thought about Marcus, about the way he'd looked at me in the lawyer's office, confused but not angry, about the text he'd sent, simple and kind even though I'd spent months being neither of those things to him. In my first life, we'd stopped speaking after the divorce was finalized. We'd divided our friend group like assets, unfollowed each other on social media, excised each other from our lives with surgical precision. I'd told myself it was healthier this way, cleaner. No messy emotions, no awkward run-ins, no painful reminders. But sitting in this apartment that still smelled faintly of his cologne, something woody and warm that I'd bought him for Christmas 2 years ago, I wondered if that had been another mistake. If pride and hurt had cost me not just a husband, but a friend. Someone who'd known me when I was young and hopeful and believed in things. Someone who'd seen me at my best and my worst and chosen me anyway. Until I'd convinced him not to. I opened a text to him, typed, "Thank you," then deleted it. Typed, "I'm sorry," then deleted that too. What could I say that wouldn't sound insane or desperate or manipulative? Finally, I just wrote, "I hope your brother enjoys the record player." The response came back almost immediately. "He will. And Elena, I mean it. I hope you have fun. You deserve to enjoy yourself." I stared at those words for a long time. You deserve to enjoy yourself. As if enjoyment was something I'd been denying myself. As if he'd noticed that before I'd noticed it myself. Maybe he had. I thought about texting back, about starting a conversation, about trying to explain the unexplainable. Instead, I set the phone down and went to the bedroom closet. In the back, behind the winter coats I never wore because it barely got cold here, I found my old portfolio case from college. Black leather, slightly scuffed, filled with projects from my senior year, ad campaigns for fictional products, magazine spreads that had never been published, a whole collection of work that represented who I'd thought I would become. I pulled out the projects one by one, spreading them across the bed. Some of them made me cringe. The design trends of 10 years ago looked dated now, and the copy too earnest or too clever by half. But some of them were still good. Creative, bold, the work of someone who'd believed she could make people feel something, buy something, believe something through the right combination of words and images. When had I stopped believing that? I knew the answer. It had been gradual, a slow erosion of confidence and ambition as I took job after job that paid the bills but fed nothing else. As I'd gotten tired, gotten realistic, gotten practical, as I'd looked at Marcus's dreams and seen them as competition instead of inspiration, I gathered up the portfolio pieces and put them back in the case, along with my laptop and the notebook where I'd been writing down my future memories. Then I pulled out my phone and started searching for something I'd never thought I'd need. A business coach, a brand consultant, someone who could help me figure out what the hell I was doing. The internet offered dozens of options. Polished websites with testimonials and packages ranging from reasonable to absurd. I scrolled through them feeling increasingly overwhelmed until I found one that caught my eye. Janice Wu, brand strategist. Her website was simple, almost austere, no stock photos of people pointing at whiteboards, no promises of overnight success, just a straightforward bio. I help people figure out what they're actually selling before they try to sell it. Her rates were listed right there on the site. $200 per hour with a 2-hour minimum initial consultation. $400. That was $400 I'd need for Comic-Con, for hotels, for food, for anything else that came up. It was $400 I couldn't afford to waste on what might be a completely useless meeting. But it was also less than I'd spent on a watch I never wore, or a gym membership I'd used twice, or any number of things I'd convinced myself I needed over the years. I booked an appointment for Friday afternoon. Janice W.'s office was in a converted warehouse downtown, the kind of building that had been industrial in its first life, and was now home to startups and creative agencies and people who described themselves as consultants. The elevator was exposed brick and reclaimed wood, probably original to the building, and it groaned ominously as it carried me to the 3rd floor. Her office door was open. She was younger than I'd expected. Mid-40s, maybe? With sharp black glasses and silver jewelry that looked handmade. She waved me in without getting up from her desk, finishing whatever she was typing before giving me her full attention. "Elena Rivera," she said, not a question. "You're early. Traffic was better than I expected." "It never is, but good for you." She gestured to a chair across from her desk. The office was small, but well organized, with a whiteboard covered in colorful diagrams and a bookshelf filled with industry publications and what looked like graphic novels. Coffee, water, fair warning. The coffee is terrible. I'm fine, thank you. She studied me for a moment with the kind of directness that would have made me uncomfortable a week ago. Now, after dying and coming back and dismantling my marriage, it barely registered. So, she said, your email was interesting. See, you said you need help figuring out your brand, but you don't know what you're branding yet. That's not usually how this works. I know, I'm sorry, I stopped trying to find words that wouldn't make me sound completely unhinged. I have an opportunity, a specific window of time to make some connections that could change my career, but I don't know what I'm offering, or how to present myself, or what I'm even trying to achieve. Okay, let's start with basics. What's the opportunity? Comic-Con, San Diego, 4 weeks from now. Her eyebrows went up slightly. You work in comics, gaming, film? No, I work in marketing. For a small firm, we do local businesses mostly. Dentists, restaurants, that kind of thing. And you're going to Comic-Con because I died alone and broke, and I've been given a second chance to not fuck up my entire life. Because my ex-husband is going to meet someone there who will make him rich, and I need to figure out how to change my own trajectory without just leeching off his success. Because I have knowledge of the future and no idea how to use it without sounding insane. Because I think there are opportunities there I've been ignoring, I said instead. Creative opportunities, networking opportunities. I just don't know how to position myself to take advantage of them. Janice leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled under her chin. 4 weeks is not a lot of time. Usually, I work with clients over several months to really dig into their brand identity, their unique value proposition. I know, but I don't have several months. I have 4 weeks, and I can't explain why exactly, but I need to make this work. She was quiet for a moment, studying me with those sharp eyes. Then she smiled, just slightly. All right, let's figure out what you've got. Tell me about your career. Start from the beginning. So I did. I told her about college, about my marketing degree, about the internship at a big agency that had seemed so promising until they'd hired someone else for the junior position. About the job at Morrison & Associates, the small firm where I'd worked for 5 years doing competent, forgettable work. About the campaigns I'd run that had succeeded and the ones that had failed, and the slow, grinding realization that I was good at my job, but not passionate about it. Why marketing? She asked at one point. So why did you choose that major? I had to think about it. It had been so long since anyone had asked me that question. I liked the idea of telling stories that made people act. Not just feel, but do something, buy something, try something, change something. I liked the psychology of it, the creativity of figuring out what would resonate with different audiences. And do you still like that? I don't know. I haven't thought about it in a long time. She made a note on the legal pad in front of her. What about the creative work you mentioned? What kind of opportunities are you seeing at Comic-Con? This was harder. How could I explain that I was seeing opportunities that hadn't fully manifested yet, that I knew about panels and meetings and chance encounters that would shape industries? There are people who will be there, I said slowly. Creators, producers, agents, people who are right on the edge of breakthrough success, and I think I could help them. I think I have skills they need. I just don't know how to articulate what those skills are in a way that makes sense in that context. Okay, let's try this. Janice pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to answer without thinking too hard. Just first instinct, all right? I nodded. If you could work on any project, with any creator, doing any kind of work, what would it be? The answer came immediately, surprising me with its clarity. I'd want to help independent creators figure out how to reach audiences, how to tell their stories in ways that cut through the noise. How to build sustainable careers doing what they love. Why? Because I'd watched Marcus pour his heart into projects that went nowhere because he didn't know how to market them. Because I'd seen brilliant work disappear into obscurity, while mediocre work with good promotion succeeded. Because in my other life, I'd spent years watching creative people struggle and never thought to help them. Because the gap between good work and successful work is usually just marketing, just understanding how to find your audience and speak to them. And most creative people are terrible at that. Janice was smiling now, actually smiling. There it is. That's your value proposition. You bridge the gap between creativity and commerce. You translate artistic vision into market success. It sounded so simple when she said it like that. So obvious. But I don't have a track record of doing that, I said. I've never worked in entertainment. You have transferable skills. And more importantly, you have passion for it. That comes through. That matters. She tapped her pen against the legal pad. Here's what I'm thinking. You don't go to Comic-Con as Elena Rivera, marketer for Morrison & Associates. You go as Elena Rivera, brand strategist for creative professionals. You go as someone who specializes in helping creators build sustainable audiences. But that's not what I do. Isn't that lying? It's not lying if you're actually offering that service. And you are, aren't you? That's what you want to do. Was it? I thought about the portfolio pieces in my closet, about the campaigns I designed in college for bands and artists and dreamers, about the version of myself who'd believed marketing could be art, about the fact that I had 4 weeks to build something that might possibly save my life. Yes, I said. That's what I want to do. Then that's what you're doing, starting now. She pulled out her phone, tapping rapidly. I'm sending you some resources. Books, podcasts, case studies of successful brand strategists in the creative space. You have 4 weeks to become as knowledgeable as possible about this field, to study what successful people in this space are doing, how they talk about their work, how they provide value. 4 weeks to become an expert? You won't be an expert, but you'll know enough to have intelligent conversations. Enough to ask good questions, enough to identify what creators need and offer legitimate solutions. She looked up from her phone. You said you work in marketing now. Give me an example of a successful campaign you've run. I thought for a moment. There's a dental practice I work with. Dr. Kim, when I took them on, they were struggling to fill appointments. Their website was a mess. Their social media was basically abandoned. I did a complete overhaul. New branding, content strategy focused on patient education, targeted ads to local families. In 6 months, they went from 40% appointment capacity to fully booked with a wait list. That's great. That's exactly the kind of result creators need. You just need to learn how to translate that success into their language. Instead of appointment capacity, you're talking about audience engagement. Instead of patient education, you're talking about fan development. Same skills, different context. It made sense. It actually made sense. I need a website, I said. Business cards, a portfolio that shows relevant work. Yes, and a pitch, a 30-second introduction that clearly communicates what you do and who you do it for. We'll work on that today. She checked her watch. We've got 90 minutes left in this session. Let's use it. By the time I left Janice's office 3 hours later, she'd insisted we go over no extra charge. I had homework that felt more daunting than my entire senior year of college. Build a website, redesign my portfolio to highlight transferable skills. Write 3 case studies framing my existing work through a creative lens. Develop a pitch. Research the major players in creative brand strategy. Read 5 books. Listen to a dozen podcast interviews. 4 weeks. It felt impossible. It felt necessary. I spent the weekend in a haze of productivity that would have worried me if I'd stopped to think about it. I didn't stop. I drank too much coffee and ate delivery food at my desk and worked until my eyes burned and my neck ached. I built a website using a template that looked professional enough, wrote copy that sounded confident, even though I felt like a fraud, created a logo that was simple but memorable. Elena Rivera, brand strategy for creative professionals. It looked real on the screen. It looked like something I did, something I was, even though I'd only decided to do it 3 days ago. Sunday evening, I went to my mother's house for the dinner I'd promised. She took one look at me and started making worried noises in Spanish, feeling my forehead for a fever, asking if I was sleeping enough. I'm fine, Mama, I said, which was a lie we both knew, but she let me tell anyway. You look like you did in college during finals week. All wild eyes and nervous energy. She ladled pozole into a bowl, the smell of hominy and chili making my stomach growl. I hadn't realized how hungry I was. What are you working on that has you like this? I wanted to tell her everything. About dying, about coming back, about the impossible gift I'd been given. But how could I explain any of that without sounding completely unhinged? I'm starting a new business, I said instead. Consulting. Brand strategy for creative professionals. She set the bowl in front of me, studying my face. Well, this is very sudden. I know. And the divorce, the marketing job, your apartment, all still happening. This is just, it's something I need to do. For myself. She sat down across from me, her own bowl steaming between us. The kitchen smelled like home, like safety, like all the Sunday dinners of my childhood. You know what your abuela used to say? Cuando Dios cierra una puerta, abre una ventana. When God closes a door, he opens a window. I'm not sure God had much to do with this, I said. Maybe not, but a closed door is still a closed door, and an open window is still a chance to breathe new air. She squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, mija. Whatever you're doing, whatever has put this fire in your eyes, I'm proud of you. I nearly cried then, but I focused on the pozole instead. Letting the heat and spice ground me in the present moment. My mother talked about her week, about my tia's latest drama, about the neighbor's dog that wouldn't stop barking. Normal things. Real things. Things that existed in a world where people didn't come back from the dead. When I left, she pressed a container of leftover pozole into my hands and hugged me tighter than usual. Call me if you need anything, even just to talk, especially just to talk. I will. And, Elena, that window your abuela talked about, sometimes you have to climb through it. Sometimes you have to jump. But you don't have to jump alone. I thought about that on the drive home, about windows and doors and jumping, about all the times in my first life I'd been too scared or too proud or too practical to jump when I had the chance, about how I'd closed myself into smaller and smaller spaces until the only window left was a hospital room overlooking a parking lot. I wasn't going to make that mistake again. The Comic-Con tickets arrived on Tuesday, delivered in a large envelope with colorful graphics and a weight that felt significant. I opened it at my kitchen table, spreading out the contents like treasure. 4 badges in clear plastic holders, each one printed with Comic-Con International and a unique barcode. A program guide the size of a phone book listing every panel, every event, every signing. A lanyard, black with rainbow lettering, and a separate sheet, printed on heavier stock, professional networking events. I scanned the list, cross-referencing it with my memories and my research. The Friday night mixer, the Saturday morning portfolio review sessions, the Sunday brunch for emerging voices in digital media. Each event required pre-registration, professional credentials, and in some cases, a work sample. I spent the next hour filling out registration forms, uploading portfolio pieces, crafting brief bios that made me sound like someone who belonged in these spaces. It felt like fraud and ambition in equal measure, each form both a lie and a promise. I wasn't a brand strategist yet, but I would be. I was becoming one with every hour I spent researching, learning, preparing. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Did the tickets arrive? Yes. Thank you again. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, can I ask why you wanted them? I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm just curious. I stared at the message for a long time. Outside my window, the sun was setting, painting the cheap apartment building across the street in shades of gold and amber. Someone was playing music, a rhythmic bass that pulsed through the walls. An ordinary Tuesday evening in an ordinary life. I think I need to try something new, I typed. Something creative. And I think Comic-Con might be a place to start. That's great. Really. I'm happy for you. The words sat there on my screen, simple and kind and utterly genuine. Marcus had always been like that, able to separate his hurt from his hope, his disappointment from his decency. It was one of the things I'd loved about him and, paradoxically, one of the things that had frustrated me most. His ability to stay positive felt like naivety sometimes, like he didn't understand how hard the world really was. But maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe his optimism wasn't ignorance, but resilience. Maybe his belief in possibility was what had allowed him to keep dreaming even when I'd mocked those dreams. You'll meet people there, I typed. Important people. Don't be afraid to talk to them, to share your ideas. A long pause. Then, that's oddly specific advice. I think this could be big for you. If you let it be. Are you okay? You're being kind of weird." I laughed, actually laughed. If only he knew. If only I could tell him that I was being weird because I died and come back and knew exactly which booth he'd wandered past where he'd first seen Sarah Chen's artwork, exactly which panel he'd attend where he'd have the idea that would change both their lives. I'm fine. Just good luck with everything. You too, Elena? Really, I set the phone down and picked up one of the badges, feeling its weight, its promise. So 4 weeks to become someone who belonged at Comic-Con's professional events. 4 weeks to build a business, a brand, a future that didn't end in a hospital room with broken lungs and empty regrets. I could do this. I had to do this. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation that consumed every moment I wasn't at my regular job. I read obsessively, books on brand strategy, case studies of successful creative consultants, autobiographies of people who'd built something from nothing. I listened to podcasts at double speed while making dinner, while driving, while lying in bed unable to sleep because my mind was spinning with ideas and plans and possibilities. I redesigned my website 4 times before I found something that felt right. Clean, professional, with just enough creative flair to show I understood the industry I was entering. I wrote blog posts about brand development for independent creators, about finding your audience in a saturated market, about the intersection of art and commerce. Most of it was synthesized from other sources, recombined and reframed through my own lens. But it sounded authentic. It sounded like I knew what I was talking about. And slowly I started to believe that maybe I actually did. I created business cards, debated the design for hours before settling on something minimalist. Elena Rivera, brand strategist. My new website and email. No job title, no company affiliation. Just me and what I was offering. I practiced my pitch in front of the bathroom mirror, in the car, walking around my neighborhood at night when I couldn't sit still anymore. Hi, and I'm Elena Rivera. I help creative professionals build sustainable audiences and turn their passion into profitable brands. 30 seconds, confident but not cocky, professional but approachable. I sounded like someone who had done this before. I sounded like someone who knew what they were doing. I was neither of those things, but I was getting better at pretending. 2 weeks before Comic-Con, I quit my job at Morrison & Associates. I'd meant to wait until after the convention to keep the safety net of a steady paycheck while I figured things out. But then Jennifer assigned me to a new client, a strip mall mattress store that wanted viral marketing. And something in me just broke. Not broke. Broke free. I walked into her office and said, "I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice." She looked up from her computer, genuinely surprised. "Is this about the fight last month? Because I thought we'd moved past." "It's not about that. I'm starting my own consultancy. Brand strategy for creative professionals." Creative professionals. She said it like I'd announced I was starting a company that sold unicorn rides. "Elena, that's a very saturated market. And you don't have any experience in that field." "I know, but I'm going to try anyway." This is about the divorce, isn't it? You're making impulsive decisions because you're... "This isn't impulsive," I said, which was a lie and a truth simultaneously. I've been thinking about this for a while. I need to do something different, something that matters to me. She studied me for a moment, and I could see her making calculations. How much it would cost to replace me? How many client relationships I'd taken over? Well, whether it was worth trying to convince me to stay. "I can't talk you out of this?" "No." "Then I wish you luck. And I mean that. You're good at what you do, Elena. You'll be good at this too, I'm sure." I worked my 2 weeks in a strange state of focused calm, tying up loose ends, transferring files, training my replacement. My coworkers threw me a small going-away party with grocery store cake and awkward speeches about how much they'd miss me. I smiled and thanked them and felt nothing but relief that I'd never have to sit in another meeting about mattress store marketing strategies. On my last day, I walked out of the building and felt lighter than I had in years. Terrified, yes. Uncertain about almost everything. But lighter. 1 week before Comic-Con, I got my professional registrations approved. All 3 events, the mixer, the portfolio reviews, the brunch, they'd accepted my credentials, my work samples, my carefully crafted bios. I was in. I booked a hotel room, the cheapest I could find that was still within walking distance of the convention center, $350 a night for 4 nights. I tried not to think about how much of my savings that would eat through. I bought new clothes. Professional, but creative. Blazers in interesting colors, shirts with subtle patterns, shoes that were comfortable enough to stand in all day, but stylish enough to make a statement. I assembled outfits for each day, photographing them on my bed like a magazine spread, making sure everything projected the right image. 3 days before Comic-Con, I had my final session with Janice. We'd been meeting weekly, refining my pitch, my approach, my entire professional identity. She'd been patient with my questions, firm when I got too uncertain, encouraging when I needed it most. "You're ready?" she said as we wrapped up. "You know that, right? You're as ready as you can be." "I don't feel ready." Nobody ever does. That's the secret. We're all just pretending to know what we're doing until we actually figure it out. She handed me a business card, her own. "Keep this. Not as a consultant, but as a contact. I want to hear how it goes. And Elena, whatever happens there, however it turns out, you've already succeeded." "What do you mean?" "You decided to try something new. You invested in yourself. You stepped outside your comfort zone and built something from scratch. That's success, regardless of what happens at Comic-Con. Don't forget that." I wanted to tell her about the dying, about the second chance, about how none of this felt optional. It felt like survival. But instead, I just said, "Thank you for everything." Go get them, brand strategist. I drove to San Diego on Wednesday, the day before Comic-Con officially started, because I wanted to get a feel for the city, for the convention center, for the entire ecosystem I was about to immerse myself in. The drive from LA was familiar. I'd made it dozens of times in my first life, but this time it felt different. Heavier with possibility, lighter with the absence of cynicism. The hotel was exactly what I'd expected. Functional, slightly worn, filled with other attendees rolling suitcases covered in convention stickers. I checked in, hauled my bags to a room on the 7th floor, and stood at the window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Marcus was arriving too. Probably staying somewhere nicer since he hadn't lost half his savings in a divorce settlement. He'd be excited, energized by the prospect of 4 days surrounded by the things he loved. In my first life, I'd thought of that enthusiasm as childish. Now I recognized it as something precious, the ability to love something unironically, without reservation, without caring what anyone else thought. I texted him, "Safe travels. See you there, maybe." "Definitely," he replied. "I'm at the Marriott if you want to meet up for coffee or something. No pressure." I stared at that message for a long time. No pressure. As if we were just old friends. Not two people who'd promised forever and then very carefully dismantled that promise piece by piece. As if we could be easy with each other again. Maybe we could. Maybe that was another thing I'd gotten wrong in my first life. Thinking that divorce meant total severance, that we couldn't find some other way to exist in each other's lives. "Maybe Friday morning," I typed. "I have the industry mixer Thursday night. Good luck. Knock 'em dead." I set the phone down and unpacked methodically, hanging up my carefully chosen outfits, laying out my business cards, charging my phone and laptop, preparing for battle. Though that wasn't quite the right metaphor. Preparing for transformation, maybe. Preparing for a version of myself that didn't exist yet, but was becoming more real with every choice I made. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the hotel bed listening to the sounds of the city. Sirens, voices, the distant thump of music from somewhere. I thought about all the people in all the hotels around me. Sleeping or not sleeping, dreaming their own dreams. How many of them were here hoping to change their lives? How many would actually succeed? I thought about Sarah Chen, probably arriving tomorrow, excited about her panel, nervous about whether anyone would care about her graphic novel. About all the almosts and might-be's converging in one place for 4 days. About Marcus, who would meet her on Friday afternoon at her booth while I was at the portfolio review session. About how I could warn him, could tell him to seek her out, could manipulate the entire situation to ensure his success. But that felt wrong somehow. Cheap. Like I'd be stealing his achievement, turning his organic connection into something calculated and false. No. Whatever happened with Marcus and Sarah would happen naturally, or it wouldn't happen at all. My job wasn't to orchestrate his future, it was to build my own. I must have fallen asleep eventually because I woke to sunlight streaming through the hotel curtains and the distant sound of excited voices in the hallway. Thursday, preview night. The convention was beginning. I showered, dressed carefully in my first chosen outfit, navy blazer, white shirt with subtle geometric pattern, dark jeans, comfortable but stylish shoes. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone professional, competent, creative, someone who belonged here. Fake it till you make it, they said. I grabbed my bag with business cards, my phone fully charged, my badge on its lanyard around my neck, and headed out into the day. The convention center was massive, sprawling, already filling with people in various states of costume and excitement. I picked up my program guide, studied the map, oriented myself in the chaos. The industry mixer wasn't until tonight, but there were panels I wanted to attend, booths I wanted to visit, research to do. I spent the day wandering, observing, learning the rhythms of this place. The exhibit hall was a sensory overload. Bright lights, music, voices, the rustle of vendor bags, the smell of new merchandise, and too many people in too small a space. I watched how people moved, how they interacted, how the professionals differentiated themselves from the general attendees. Around 3, I found myself at Artist Alley, where independent creators sold their work from booth after booth. This was the heart of it, I realized. This was where the dreamers congregated, hoping someone would notice them, would buy their comic or their print or their novel. This was where the next big thing might be hiding, indistinguishable from the hundreds of other hopefuls. I stopped at a booth run by a young woman with bright blue hair and nervous energy. Her comic was called Circuits, a cyberpunk story with gorgeous art and ambitious world building. She was selling issues for $5 each. "This is beautiful," I said, genuinely meaning it. "How long have you been working on this?" Her whole face lit up. 3 years. I do everything myself. Writing, art, lettering. It's a labor of love, honestly. "Do you have a website? Social media?" "Oh, yeah, but..." She trailed off, looking embarrassed. "I'm not great at self-promotion. I just want to make the comics, you know?" This was exactly what Janice had talked about. The gap between good work and successful work. "I help people with that," I said, surprising myself with how natural it sounded. "I'm a brand strategist. I work with creative professionals to build their audiences." I handed her my card. She took it, studying it with an expression that was equal parts hopeful and skeptical. "I can't afford a consultant," she said apologetically. "I'm not trying to sell you anything right now. I'm just networking, building connections. But if you're ever interested in talking about strategies for growing your audience, my email's on there. No pressure." "Thank you," she said, tucking the card into her pocket. "And thank you for buying the comic. It really means a lot." I walked away feeling strange, good and guilty and uncertain all at once. I hadn't lied to her. I had offered genuine help. But I'd also never worked with a comic creator before, had no track record in this industry. No proof I could actually help her. But I could. I knew I could. I just needed the chance to prove it. I visited more booths, had more conversations, handed out more cards. Some people looked at me like I was trying to scam them. Others seemed interested but wary. A few took my card and asked questions, genuine questions about what I did and how I could help. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, I'd talked to maybe 20 creators. I'd handed out 40 business cards. I'd started to feel less like an imposter and more like someone who was actually doing the things she claimed to do. I had 2 hours before the mixer. I went back to my hotel room, changed into a slightly dressier outfit, touched up my makeup, practiced my pitch one more time in the mirror. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to calm the anxiety crawling up my throat. This was it. The industry mixer. The room full of professionals, of gatekeepers, of people who could actually make or break careers. And I was going to walk in there and pretend I belonged. No, not pretend. Believe. I was going to walk in there and believe I belonged. Because I did. Because I'd earned this badge, this invitation, this chance. Because I'd already died once and I wasn't going to waste this second life being afraid. At 8 o'clock, I walked into the grand ballroom on the 2nd floor of the convention center and into the rest of my life. The mixer was less intimidating than I'd feared and more intimidating than I'd hoped. The room was filled with maybe 200 people, all holding drinks, all engaged in that particular kind of professional socializing that looked effortless but required tremendous skill. Agents talking to producers, editors talking to creators, everyone performing casualness while furiously networking. I grabbed a glass of wine I didn't really want and positioned myself near a wall, observing, looking for openings, trying to figure out how to insert myself into conversations without looking desperate. A woman approached the table next to me, reaching for a napkin. Mid-40s, sharp suit, kind eyes. I recognized her from my research. Melissa Torres, the literary agent who specialized in graphic novel adaptations. "Quite a crowd," she said to me. Not really an opening, but not closing the door either. "Bigger than I expected," I said. "Is this your first time at the Mixer?" "Third. You?" "First. I'm still figuring out how this all works. Honesty, sometimes the best approach. It's mostly organized chaos. The trick is to talk to people without looking like you're trying to talk to people." She smiled. "I'm Melissa, by the way. Elena, brand strategist for creative professionals." The words came out smoothly, confidently, like I'd been saying them for years instead of weeks. "Oh, what kind of creative professionals?" And we were off. I talked about my work, about the gap between good creation and successful creation, about how I helped people find and build their audiences. She listened with genuine interest, asked smart questions, told me about some of her clients who struggled with exactly these issues. We talked for maybe 15 minutes before someone else approached her, clearly wanting her attention. But before she moved away, she handed me her card. "Send me an email," she said. "I'd love to continue this conversation. I might have some clients who could use your services." I stood there for a moment after she left, card in hand, slightly stunned. That had actually worked. I'd had a real conversation with a real industry professional, and she'd been interested. Genuinely interested. The night continued like that. Conversations that started awkwardly and became real, business cards exchanged, connections made. Not all of them were promising. Some people were clearly just being polite. But some, like the producer who wanted to know more about audience analysis, or the indie publisher looking for someone to help with their marketing strategy, some were genuine opportunities. I saw Marcus across the room at one point, so talking to a group of people, laughing at something someone said. He looked happy, comfortable in a way he'd rarely looked during the last year of our marriage. I almost went over but decided against it. This wasn't the time. We'd find our moment, or we wouldn't. Around 10, pleasantly exhausted and slightly buzzed from the wine I'd been nursing all night, I ended up in conversation with a man who introduced himself as David Park, the producer. I recognized the name from my research, from the guest list. "Brand strategy, huh?" he said. "That's interesting. We're actually looking for someone to help with marketing for our new production company. We've got the creative side down, but we're terrible at the business side." "What kind of productions?" I asked. "Graphic novel adaptations. We've got the rights to a few properties. But we need to build buzz, grow the audience before the shows even premiere." He pulled out his phone. "Actually, can I get your contact info? We should set up a proper meeting." I gave him my information, trying to keep my hand from shaking as I typed my email address into his phone. This was real. This was actually happening. By the time the Mixer ended at 11, I'd collected 17 business cards and given out maybe 30 of mine. I'd had conversations that felt promising, connections that felt genuine. I'd started to believe that maybe this wasn't just a desperate fantasy, maybe I was actually building something. I walked back to my hotel through streets filled with costumed attendees, through the energy and excitement and pure nerdy joy that permeated everything during Comic-Con. The night air was cool, so tinged with salt from the ocean, and I felt more alive than I had in years, in either life. Back in my room, I carefully organized the business cards I'd collected, adding notes about each conversation while it was still fresh in my mind. Then I drafted follow-up emails, personalized for each contact, striking that balance between professional and personable. Only when that was done did I let myself collapse onto the bed, still fully dressed, and just breathe. Tomorrow was Friday, the portfolio review sessions, more panels, more networking, more chances to prove myself, and somewhere in all of that, Marcus would meet Sarah Chen. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe I'd changed enough that the timeline had shifted. Maybe my presence here, my new path, had already altered things in ways I couldn't predict. But that was okay. That was more than okay. Because for the first time in either life, I wasn't just reacting to Marcus's success or lack thereof. I was building my own. I fell asleep with my phone in my hand, business cards spread across the nightstand, and hope Actual, genuine hope lodged in my chest like a promise. Friday morning, I met Marcus for coffee. The cafe was busy, filled with bleary-eyed attendees loading up on caffeine before another long day. Marcus was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table by the window, 2 cups of coffee in front of him. "I got you a latte," he said. "Vanilla, like you used to drink. If you don't want it, it's perfect. Thank you." We sat in slightly awkward silence for a moment, both of us aware that this was the first time we'd been alone together since the lawyer's office. Well, since the division of our life into neat categories of ownership. "So," he said finally, "how's it going? The brand strategy thing?" "Good. Really good, actually. I had the industry mixer last night and made some promising connections." "That's great. I'm proud of you." He said it simply, without irony or bitterness, just honest happiness that I was doing something I cared about. It made my chest ache. "What about you?" I asked. "What are you excited about today?" His face lit up the way it always did when he talked about his interests. "There's a panel on the future of digital comics, and I want to check out this new graphic novel series, Nexus. The creator's doing a signing this afternoon." There it was. Sarah Chen. Nexus. The moment that would change his life. I could tell him to make sure he talked to her, to share his ideas about AR integration, to get her contact information. I could orchestrate the entire thing. "You should definitely check that out," I said instead, "and talk to her if you get the chance. Creators appreciate when people are genuinely interested in their work." "Yeah?" He looked uncertain. I never know if I'm being annoying or if they actually want to chat. "They want to chat. Trust me. That's how connections happen." I took a sip of my latte, letting the familiar sweetness ground me. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Were you happy? In the marriage? Before everything went wrong?" He considered the question seriously, which was one of the things I'd always loved about him. He didn't just give easy answers. "I was, for a long time. I think we both were." "When did it change?" "I don't know. Gradually, I guess. It felt like we started wanting different things. Or maybe we always wanted different things, but we stopped being able to pretend we didn't." He met my eyes. "Why are you asking?" "Because I think I made mistakes. A lot of them. And I'm trying to learn from them." I set down my cup. "I dismissed the things you cared about. Your hobbies, your dreams. I made you feel like they were silly or unimportant. And I'm sorry for that." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, a group of people in elaborate costumes walked past the window, laughing about something. Life continuing all around us while we sat in this small bubble of honesty. "I made mistakes too," he said finally. "I let myself get so absorbed in my own interests that I stopped paying attention to you, to what you needed. We both kind of gave up. I think. Yeah, but I don't regret it. The marriage, I mean. I learned a lot about myself, about what I want, about how to be better in my next relationship." He smiled, a little sad but genuine. "And I hope you did too?" I did. I am. We finished our coffee talking about lighter things. The convention, the city, mutual friends we'd split up like assets. It was bittersweet and comfortable and painful all at once. A reminder of what we'd lost and an acknowledgement that we'd both be okay. When we parted ways outside the cafe, he hugged me. A real hug, not the perfunctory kind you give to acquaintances. "Good luck today, Elena, with all of it." "You too. And Marcus, don't be afraid to share your ideas. You have good ones. People should hear them." He looked at me curiously, like he was trying to figure out what had changed in me. But all he said was, "Thanks. I'll try." I watched him walk away, heading toward the convention center with his badge bouncing against his chest, and felt something unlock in my chest. Grief, maybe. Or the release of it. The acceptance that we'd been something important to each other, and now we were something different. And both those things could be true at the same time. Then I turned and headed toward my own future. The portfolio review sessions were intimidating in a completely different way than the mixer. This was personal, exposing. I sat across from experienced brand strategists and marketing professionals and showed them my work while they evaluated it, critiqued it, asked probing questions about my approach and methodology. The first reviewer, a woman named Patricia, who ran a successful agency in New York, was blunt to the point of brutal. She flipped through my portfolio quickly, pausing occasionally to make notes I couldn't see. Your work is competent, she said, but it's safe. Where's your voice? What makes your approach different from the 100 other brand strategists trying to break into this market? I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I was new to this, that I was still figuring it out. Instead, I said, "That's a fair criticism. What would you suggest?" She looked up, surprised by the question. Most people get defensive when I say that. I'm here to learn. That shifted something. She spent the next 20 minutes giving me actual advice, ways to differentiate my approach, questions to ask clients that would reveal unique angles, strategies for positioning myself in a crowded market. By the time our session ended, I had a notebook full of notes and a much clearer vision of how to refine my work. The second reviewer was gentler, but equally valuable. He asked about my background, my journey into brand strategy, what made me passionate about this work. And as I answered, I realized I had a story to tell. Not the story of dying and coming back. I couldn't tell that one. But the story of realizing I'd been doing marketing work that didn't matter to me, of seeing an opportunity to help creative people I believed in, of taking a risk to build something meaningful. That's your value proposition right there, he said. You're not just a brand strategist. You're someone who understands what it's like to do work that doesn't fulfill you, and you want to help creative people avoid that trap. That's authentic. Yeah, that resonates. By the time I finished all 3 review sessions, my head was spinning with feedback and ideas. Some of it contradictory, all of it valuable. I sat in a quiet corner of the convention center, typing notes into my phone, trying to capture everything before I forgot. A text from Marcus. Met the Nexus creator. You were right. She was super cool. Got her card. I smiled. It was happening. The connection that would change his life was forming naturally, organically, without my interference. As it should be. Another text, this one from David Park, the producer I'd met last night. Free for a quick chat? I'm at the coffee stand near Hall B. My pulse quickened. I texted back that I'd be there in 5 minutes, then took a moment to breathe, to center myself. This could be nothing, or this could be everything. I found him easily. Tall, late 40s, wearing a Comic-Con lanyard and a shirt from some show I didn't recognize. He waved me over, already holding 2 cups of coffee. I figured you could use more caffeine, he said, handing me one. How are the portfolio reviews going? Brutal, but helpful. That's the way. Listen, I talked to my partner this morning. Told him about our conversation last night. We're serious about needing marketing help. Would you be interested in consulting for us? Just to start. See how it goes. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Absolutely. What kind of timeline are you thinking? We're launching our first production in about 6 months. A series based on an indie comic called Echo Chamber. Great story, but the comic only has about 10,000 regular readers. We need to grow that audience before the show drops, build buzz, create demand. I knew Echo Chamber, or I would know it. In my previous life, the show had been a surprise hit, had launched the careers of several actors, had spawned a franchise, but that had been with a different production company, different marketing, different everything. This was already different. The timeline had already changed. I'd need to read the source material, I said, understand the story, the characters, what makes it unique. Then I'd want to do a competitive analysis, see what similar properties have done successfully, and I'd need to talk to the comic creator, understand their existing audience. David was grinning. See, this is exactly what we need. Someone who actually thinks about strategy instead of just throwing money at social media ads. Can you put together a proposal? Nothing formal, just an outline of your approach and your rates. Rates. I hadn't actually settled on rates. I'd been so focused on just getting in the door that I hadn't thought about what I would charge once I did. I can have something to you by Monday, I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. Perfect. And Elena, I think this could be the start of something really good. After he left, I sat at the coffee stand for a long time, just processing. This was real. Someone wanted to hire me. Not for my experience or my track record or my credentials, but for my ideas, my approach, my potential. I pulled out my phone and texted Janice. I think I just got my first client. Her response came back immediately. Knew it. Details later. Go celebrate. But I didn't want to celebrate yet. I wanted to work. I wanted to pour all this energy into something productive, to prove that I could actually deliver on what I'd promised. I spent the rest of Friday in a blur of panels and networking and research. I bought the first 2 volumes of Echo Chamber, read them cover to cover in a Starbucks while nursing iced coffee that got warm in my hands. The comic was good. Really good. Dark sci-fi with complex characters and themes about identity and reality that would resonate with the right audience. I could work with this. I could build something around this. That night, back in my hotel room, I started outlining my proposal. Target demographics, social media strategies, partnership opportunities, ways to leverage the existing fan base and expand beyond it. I wrote until my eyes burned and my coffee went cold and my back ached from hunching over my laptop. I fell asleep with my laptop still open, mid-sentence, dreaming of timelines that branched and converged and split again like fractals. Saturday was the biggest day of the convention. The exhibit hall was packed wall to wall, making it nearly impossible to move. I had the brunch for emerging voices in digital media at 11. Then the rest of the day was mine to wander, to observe, to continue building connections. The brunch was at a restaurant a few blocks from the convention center, a welcome respite from the crowds. About 40 people attended, a mix of content creators, platform developers, and a few traditional media types trying to understand the digital landscape. I sat at a table with 3 other women, all of them running their own digital media ventures in various stages of success. We talked about algorithms, about audience retention, about the constant pressure to create content while also running a business. They were smart, funny, exhausted in the way all entrepreneurs are exhausted. One of them, a woman named Rachel, who ran a successful YouTube channel about comic book history, asked me the question I'd been dreading. So, what's your success rate? Like, what kind of results have your clients seen? This was the moment. I could lie, inflate some numbers, pretend to have a track record I didn't have. Or I could be honest. I'm new to this, I said. I'm transitioning from traditional marketing into brand strategy for creative professionals. So I don't have client success stories yet, but I have the skills, the methodology, and I'm so hungry to prove myself that I'll work twice as hard as someone more established. Rachel looked at me for a long moment. Then she laughed. You know what? I respect that. Want to know a secret? Most of us are making it up as we go. The difference between the successful people and the struggling ones isn't that the successful ones know more. It's that they're better at pretending they do until they actually figure it out. That's terrifying. It's also liberating. You know why? She leaned forward. Because it means you're not actually behind. You're just starting from a different place. And that's fine. The conversation shifted to other topics, but those words stayed with me. I wasn't behind. I was just starting. After brunch, I wandered the exhibit hall with no particular agenda, just observing. The energy was incredible. Thousands of people united by their love of stories, of art, of imagination. I watched panels from the back of crowded rooms. I stood in Artist Alley talking to creators about their work, their dreams, their struggles to make ends meet while pursuing their passion. And I started to understand, really understand, what I could offer these people. Not just marketing strategies or audience growth, but belief, validation, someone who took their work seriously and wanted to help them succeed. Around 3, I found myself back at the booth where I'd bought circuits on Thursday. The blue-haired creator, I'd learned her name was Jen, was talking to a tall man in his 30s. They were discussing her work, and I could see her lighting up as she explained her process, her vision. When the man moved on, I approached. How's it been going? Good. Better than I expected, actually. I've sold out of issue 3, and I'm down to my last few copies of 1 and 2. She smiled, and I wanted to thank you for what you said the other day about self-promotion. I've been thinking about it. Yeah, I'm terrible at social media. I post my pages, and that's it. But you made me realize that I'm not just selling a comic. I'm selling a story, an experience. And I need to share that experience, not just the product. She pulled out my business card. I can't afford to hire you, but could I maybe take you for a coffee sometime? Pick your brain about strategy? Tell you what, I said, you buy the coffee and I'll give you an hour of free consulting. Consider it an investment in your success? Her eyes widened. Seriously? Seriously, I'm building my client base, and I'd rather work with people whose work I actually believe in, even if it's just an hour to start. We exchanged numbers, made tentative plans to meet after the convention, and as I walked away, I realized something important. I didn't need every creator to be my client. I didn't need to sign huge contracts or work with big companies. I just needed to help people. One conversation at a time, one strategy at a time. The rest would follow. Or it wouldn't, and I'd figure that out too. Sunday, the final day, felt different. There was an undercurrent of melancholy to the festivities, the awareness that this temporary community would disperse in a few hours. Cosplayers posed for final photos. Artists marked down their prints. Panel rooms began to empty as people headed home early to beat traffic. I had one more professional event, a networking breakfast for innovative approaches to creative marketing. It was smaller than the other events, maybe 20 people, but the conversation was sharp and engaged. I talked about my philosophy, helping creators bridge the gap between art and audience. And people actually listened, actually asked questions, actually seemed to think I might know what I was talking about. One man, a professor who taught digital marketing at a university in Portland, asked if I'd be interested in guest lecturing for his class. Your approach is fresh. The students would benefit from hearing it. Guest lecturing. Me, teaching other people about brand strategy. I'd be honored, I said, and meant it. After breakfast, I had a few hours before I needed to check out of my hotel. I wandered the exhibit hall one last time, saying silent goodbyes to the booths I'd visited, the people I'd talked to, the version of myself who'd walked in here 4 days ago terrified and uncertain. I wasn't that person anymore, not entirely. I still had a long way to go, a lot to learn, a lot to prove. But I'd started. I'd taken the first steps into a future that might, just might, not end in a hospital room. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Hey, are you still here? Want to grab lunch? Sure, where? There's a taco place near the gas lamp, Los Primos. I found him there 20 minutes later, sitting at an outdoor table with a woman I recognized from the convention program. Sarah Chen. She was younger than I'd imagined, mid-20s, with black hair pulled into a messy bun and ink-stained fingers. Elena? Marcus waved me over. Whoa, this is Sarah. We've been talking about this crazy idea for an app. Sarah, this is my ex-wife, Elena. Nice to meet you, Sarah said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm, her smile genuine. Marcus has been telling me about your brand strategy work. That's so cool that you're getting into that space. We sat together, the three of us, eating tacos and talking about ideas. About how technology could enhance storytelling, about audience engagement and market positioning, and all the things that lived at the intersection of creativity and commerce. It was easy, natural, the way good conversations are. And I realized something. I didn't resent Sarah. I didn't see her as a threat, or as someone who would steal Marcus's future success. I saw her as a talented creator with big ideas and no idea how to market them. You know, I said during a lull in the conversation, you should think about your brand strategy. Nexus has so much potential, but you need to build the audience now before you launch whatever your next project is. Give people a reason to follow you, not just the comic. Sarah looked interested. That's smart. I have no idea how to do that, though. I'm terrible at self-promotion. Most creators are. That's why people like me exist. I pulled out a business card. I had exactly 3 left and handed it to her. I'd be happy to talk strategy with you sometime. Maybe over video call since we're in different cities. Really? That would be amazing. What do you charge? I hadn't worked out my pricing structure beyond what I was going to propose to David Park. But looking at Sarah, at her obvious talent and limited resources, I knew what the right answer was. First consultation is free. After that, we can figure out something that works for your budget. Marcus was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Surprised, maybe, or impressed, or just confused about who I'd become in the weeks since the divorce. You're different, he said after Sarah excused herself to use the restroom. Not bad different, just different. I had to be, I said, which was true in ways he couldn't possibly understand. I'm glad. You seem happier, more alive. I feel it. Sarah came back and we talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily among the 3 of us. I gave them both advice about networking, about following up with the contacts they'd made, about staying in touch with the people they'd connected with here. I watched Marcus and Sarah bounce ideas off each other and saw the spark of something beginning. Friendship, collaboration, something that could become extraordinary if they nurtured it. But that was their journey now. Mine was elsewhere. When we finally parted ways, Marcus hugged me again. "Thank you," he said, "for the tickets, for the advice, for all of it." "You're going to do great things," I said. "Both of you." I meant it. The drive back to LA felt longer than the drive down had been. Traffic was heavy with people leaving the convention, cars packed with bags and boxes and new treasures. I sat in the slow-moving line of vehicles and thought about everything that had happened in the last 4 days. I'd made connections, real ones. David Park wanted to hire me. Jen wanted to work with me. Sarah and Marcus would both probably reach out for advice. The professor wanted me to guest lecture. Melissa Torres wanted to continue our conversation. None of it was guaranteed. None of it might lead anywhere. But it was more than I'd had a month ago when I'd walked into that lawyer's office and asked for the Comic-Con tickets instead of the record player. My phone rang. Jennifer, my old boss at Morrison & Associates. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Elena, hi. I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all. What's up?" "I wanted to let you know, we got a call from David Park, the producer. He's looking for marketing help for a new project and asked if we'd be interested. I told him we were fully booked, but I gave him your number instead. I figured since you're doing the creative consultancy thing now, or it might be a better fit for you." You referred him to me?" "Of course, Elena. I meant what I said when you quit. You're good at this. And I'd rather see you succeed on your own than see good work go to waste. Plus, if this goes well, maybe we can partner on future projects. I'd be open to that." I had to blink back sudden tears. "Thank you, Jennifer. That means a lot." "Go get 'em, and keep in touch, yeah?" After we hung up, I had to pull over for a moment just to breathe. People were rooting for me. People believed in me. Not because of my past success or my credentials, but because they saw my potential, my passion, my willingness to work hard. I called Janice, who answered on the second ring. "Tell me everything," she demanded. So I did. I told her about the mixer, the portfolio reviews, the brunch. About David Park and Sarah Chen and Jen and all the connections I'd made. About the proposal I needed to write and the pricing I needed to figure out and the website I needed to update. "You know what you need to do now?" she said when I finished. "What?" "You need to deliver. All of this means nothing if you can't actually help these people. So, now comes the hard part. Proving you can do what you say you can do. I know. I'm terrified." "Good. Terror means you care. Just make sure it doesn't paralyze you." She paused. "I'm proud of you, Elena. You took a huge risk and it's paying off. Don't stop now." "I won't." "And Elena, remember what I said about success? You've already achieved it. Everything else is just bonus." The next 6 months were the hardest I'd ever worked in either life. I finished the proposal for David Park in 3 days, sent it over, spent a sleepless night convinced I'd asked for too much money or too little, or that the whole thing was a disaster. He called the next morning to say it looked great. When could I start? I worked with Echo Chamber's creator to develop a social media strategy. I analyzed their existing fan base, identified growth opportunities, created content calendars and engagement plans. I spent 12-hour days researching, writing, revising, learning as I went. I met with Jen for coffee and spent 2 hours breaking down her brand strategy. She couldn't afford to pay me, but she insisted on trading art for services, a commissioned piece for my website, character designs I could use in my marketing materials. It was a fair trade, and it taught me that value came in many forms. Sarah Chen became a regular consulting client. We talked every other week about her plans for expanding Nexus, about leveraging her Comic-Con connections, about building her platform beyond just the comic. She paid me a rate that was lower than I charged corporate clients, but still meaningful. And watching her grow, seeing her confidence increase as her audience expanded, that was worth more than any fee. Marcus and Sarah did launch their app. 6 months after Comic-Con, right on schedule with my memories, though I'd had nothing to do with it except answering a few questions when Marcus asked. They got venture capital funding within 3 months of launch. The app hit 1 million downloads within the first year. Marcus sent me a bottle of champagne when it happened with a note, "Thank you for believing in us." Well, even when we didn't believe in ourselves, I drank it alone in my new apartment, a better apartment, in a better building, with an elevator that worked and no mold anywhere, and toasted to parallel success. To the idea that 2 people could both win, that it didn't have to be zero-sum. The Echo Chamber series launched in June, 8 months after I started consulting on it. The show was good, really good, and the audience we'd built was ready for it. Social media lit up with discussions, fan theories, excitement. The creator credited me in an interview, said I'd helped them understand their audience in ways they never had before. That interview led to 3 more client inquiries, then 5, then 10. By the time a year had passed since Comic-Con, I had a client roster of 15 creative professionals. I'd hired an assistant to help with administrative work. I'd raised my rates twice. I'd been featured in a podcast about successful career transitions. I was making more money than I ever had at Morrison & Associates. But more than that, I was doing work that mattered. Work that helped people achieve their dreams. Work that felt like it meant something. On the anniversary of the divorce settlement, I took myself out to dinner. The same restaurant where Marcus and I used to celebrate anniversaries when we were married. I ordered the same meal I'd ordered on our last anniversary together, when we'd sat across from each other making stilted conversation and both pretending everything was fine. But tonight, I wasn't pretending. Tonight, I was celebrating a year of being alive, of being present, of building something real. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Hey, just realized what day it is. How are you doing? Good. Really good, actually. You? Same. Sarah and I are opening a production studio. We're adapting Nexus for TV. That's amazing. Congratulations. Thanks. Hey, we're going to need marketing help. You interested? I sat with that for a moment. A year ago, I would have seen this as validation, proof that I'd been right to take the tickets, right to change my path. Or maybe I would have seen it as dependence, as somehow diminishing my own success by working with my ex-husband. But now I just saw it as an opportunity, one of many. Send me the details, I typed. Let's talk. I finished my dinner slowly, savoring each bite, watching people around me living their lives. Couples on dates, families celebrating, solo diners like me, present with their own thoughts and choices. When I died in my first life, I'd had so many regrets. The divorce, the career I'd settled for, the relationships I'd let wither, the chances I'd been too scared to take. But sitting here now, in this second life, I realized something. It wasn't the big dramatic changes that mattered most. It wasn't the knowing the future, or the manipulating of events, or the orchestrating of success. It was the small moments. The decision to accept the Comic-Con tickets instead of the record player. The choice to invest in myself instead of clinging to security. The willingness to be honest about what I didn't know instead of pretending to have all the answers. The courage to try something new even when I was terrified. All those small choices, compounding over time, had built this life, this better life. I paid my check and walked out into the warm evening air. Somewhere across the city, Marcus was probably having dinner with Sarah, planning their next venture. Somewhere, creators I'd worked with were making art and building careers. Somewhere, my mother was probably worrying about me, but also proud of me. And here I was, alone, but not lonely, successful, but still growing. Alive in a way I hadn't been in decades. The guest list at Comic-Con had been worth $10,000. Supposedly. The networking opportunities, the connections, the potential. But the real value hadn't been in the list itself. It had been in what I'd chosen to do with it, how I'd shown up, what I'd built from that foundation. I pulled out my phone and texted Janice. Remember when you said I'd already succeeded just by trying? Her response came quickly. Of course. You were right, but I'm not done yet. Good. Don't be. I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove home through streets I knew by heart, but saw with new eyes every day. Tomorrow I had client calls, proposals to write, a business to grow. Tomorrow I'd keep building, keep learning, keep becoming someone I could be proud of. But tonight, I just drove and breathed and marveled at the impossible gift of second chances. Not everyone got to die and come back. Not everyone got to fix their mistakes, to choose differently, to build a better life from the ruins of a failed one. But I had, and I wasn't going to waste it. Life unfolded like the wind, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, always moving forward. You couldn't control it. You could only choose how to move with it, when to bend and when to stand firm, when to let go, and when to hold on. I'd learned that the hard way, twice. I'd learned it in a hospital bed with failing lungs, and I'd learned it in a lawyer's office when I chose Comic-Con tickets over a record player. I'd learned it in every moment since, every choice, every risk, every small brave step into an unknown future. And I was still learning, still growing, still becoming. The road stretched ahead, dark but for the headlights carving a path through the night. I didn't know where it led. I didn't need to. I just needed to keep driving.